You guys know I'm writing a book on the science of manifestation. I don't know if you guys have ever written a book or like a screenplay or a story or something like that, but the writing process is so hard. It's so much harder than I anticipated because I've been writing emails for years, Instagram captions for years. Writing it down is like so much harder for some reason. Like, I feel like when I talk to you guys, it makes sense, it's conversational, you guys give good feedback, but when I go to write and I reread what I wrote, it sounds dull and boring. So I'm gonna need your help. I think I'm just gonna read through what I'm writing so you guys get a sneak peek at the book. Wait, I feel embarrassed to say some of this out loud. You are amazing. Thank you. Please hop in if things make sense or don't make sense. If you like the live, that's helpful for me to see, because then I'm like, okay, this is clicking, this makes sense. And if I'm getting a lot of questions that are like, huh, what? Then I know I should rewrite that. All of these things I'm about to say, I've shared on TikTok at some point in some way, but I'm like so nervous to say it out loud. I don't know why this book is getting me so like in my head. So the first premise that I want to talk about is, what is a wave? So a wave, everything in our whole universe is made up of waves. By the time you get to this chapter in the book, we would have already talked about how there's particle duality. On the quantum world, we can't define where anything is. So in the quantum world, the fundamental state of a particle is actually its wave-like state, where it is completely unknown. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle states that we can only measure like one property at a time and therefore not know anything about the other properties. And so we're going to talk about waves in chapter 1 or whatever, the chapter before this, about like how waves, the thing you need to know to change your world, because the point isn't just to talk about science for the sake of science. The point of this book is to help you understand manifestation on a scientifically fundamental level. And so what is a wave? So now we're going to get into the nitty gritty. A wave is an energy in motion. It's a disturbance or a vibration moving through space. So it's like if you toss a pebble into a perfectly still pond, when the pebble hits the water, it creates a concentric circle of ripples that spread outward. Those ripples are the wave we can see. The energy of the pebble drop, the potential energy turns to kinetic energy. It transfers its energy to the water, and it creates the pattern of peaks and valleys as it moves out, right? The ripple of the water goes like this, and then it kind of tampers down over time. So the ripples near the center. Okay, the likes are helping. At least the first 3 sentences are clicking. Thank you, guys. The ripples near the center are closest together and have the highest peaks and valleys, and they slowly damper down as it gets farther from the pebble. I know you guys know what happens when you drop a pebble in the water, but I want to explicitly say this because it'll make sense as we continue in the chapter. So the height of the peaks of the wave, so when you drop the pebble and you have the waves, the height is called the amplitude of a wave. And the higher the peak, the higher the amplitude. If you were to do a cannonball in the water instead of drop a pebble, you'd have a lot higher amplitude. And a pebble's amplitude is like boop. And the frequency of a wave is how fast the wave vibrates. It's measured in cycles per second. I couldn't think of a really good analogy to do with pebbles in the water, so I had a different analogy and then I deleted it because I thought it was stupid. But basically, okay, like if you were to nail a nail in if you had a hammer in your hand and there's a nail in a wood and you were hammering that, you could hammer at like 5 nail hits per second or something, right? Like da 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 da. If instead of you manually nailing this hammer in the wood, if you had a jackhammer, like the machine, right? And it's like da 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 da, like so fast per second, you could do like 500 jackhammer hits per second, right? Like something like that. Like you could do so many like da 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 with like a jackhammer, like that frequency is a lot higher because you can do so many more hits per second. Or, since technically the motion is up and down, cycles per second, where if you're manually doing it, it's a lot slower. So that is frequency. So, okay, thank you guys for liking the live. So every time you like the live, in my head, I'm like, okay, this analogy makes sense, keep it. And then if there's not a lot of action, I'm like, okay, change that. So I don't know, I don't really feel like that's the best analogy, but I do feel like it gets the idea out there. Then I'm using, to describe waves, this radio analogy, because if you've ever followed me, you've ever gone on my lives, we always talk about like how manifestation is like using a radio. So this radio analogy is going to keep popping up throughout the book. And I was like, why not just like run with it? So, okay, so we have a DJ, he's in this radio tower. He presses play on a song. He wants this one song to ripple out, okay? So when he presses play, the radio tower is transmitting this song throughout the town the way when you drop a pebble in the water and it has all those ripples. You press play on the song from the radio transmitter and it's creating that same shape, only it's radio waves in the air. Does that make sense? And that instead of like however far pebbles ripples go, like this is going for miles and miles and miles. And the ripples from the radio tower are strongest by the tower, and they get weaker as they spread away from the tower, just like a pebble. And the intensity of the wave actually drops in proportion to the square of the distance, in theory. But obstacles such as trees, buildings, smog, there's so much smog. I'm in Vietnam right now, in Hanoi, and I think there's a lot of like pollution in the air, so I think sound doesn't travel as much. Any other form of energy, anything in the air creates actually resistance, so the radio transmission doesn't go quite as far as in theory, but it does stay stronger by the tower, weaker away from the tower. But what's really interesting, that I think is really interesting to note here, is just because the radio signal is too weak to detect. So, the radio tower's on and you have the strongest waves by the tower. If you turn on your radio by a radio tower, you expect it to work pretty well, right? Like flawlessly. It's when you're driving your car in the mountains and you're not really sure what stations you're going to pick up over there. Right? Intuitively, you understand, like, I'm farther from the tower, I may or may not pick up this signal. But, like, that doesn't actually, it doesn't mean the signal's not there. When you drop a pebble in the water, the ripples, ripple, ripple, ripple. Eventually, it stops rippling. Like at the other end of the pond, you're not going to see this ripple. But the truth is, the ripples actually don't stop. They just get too small for our detection. So it gets to a point where we can't see them anymore, but technically the ripple effect is still ripple affecting. Same with the radio tower song. So if you play the song from the radio tower, in the town you're in, it's going to be a high frequency, everyone can hear it. And as it gets farther and farther out, the frequency will dip and you may or may not be able to hear it. But it's not like the frequency just cuts off. It's actually just too small for radio detection. So, if the amplitude needs to be 10, that doesn't even make sense, but I'm just using that for an example. Like by the radio tower, the amplitude's 100. So it's good, it's fine. Your radio can pick it up. It's plenty. But, in the mountains, maybe it's like hovering 10, 9.5, 9, 10.5, depending on like what trees are in the way or whatever. So then like, maybe you can get the signal, maybe you're not. But even if you can't get the signal, the radio wave is still there. The song is still there in the ethers. You just can't access it with your radio. And then like even farther, let's say you drive a few miles, your radio is like 100% static at this point. You ain't picking up the song, okay? It's still technically there. Its amplitude is just like 3. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, if the radio, it has to be a 10 for you to perceive it, and it's like 3, 2. Like, you're going to hear static on your radio, but technically it's still there. And earlier, I made the effort to say this, but I feel like I should elaborate on like why I'm saying this. Or the amplitude reduces in proportion to the square of the distance. And if you know, when you take the square of something, it can never get to 0, right? Like if you keep taking the square, it's always going to be a number. Like you're never going to get to 0. It's like if you take a paper and cut it in half, cut it in half, cut it in half, cut a half in half, cut a half in half. You're never going to get to a 0 paper. You will get to a piece too small that you personally can't cut it with your giant lobster claws, but there's technically still paper there. So, this radio song is still in the air, even if you can't hear it with your radio. And isn't that so cool? So it's like, okay, so what is there? The point of me saying this whole thing, so note to self, elaborate on this. You're in your ethers right now. Not only are there songs from like your town, but the songs from like 2 states over are technically on an infinitesimally small level that's imperceivable to you. They're technically in the airwaves by you right now, because they don't go away. And the point of this is to say, if everything in our universe is vibration and frequency, and we know these frequencies are here and around us all the time, and we also know they carry information that does not go away, the point isn't whether we can perceive them. The point is the information there or not there? And the information is there. So, detection aside, what, right? Like, doesn't that raise more questions than it answers? Like, so what else is there? Like, what else is in the skies? What else is touching me right now? Like, the radio waves are touching you. They're touching me right now, right? Like, if I had the radio, it'd work, so I know the waves are here. So what else is here? And what else is simply beyond our detection? There's a lot of crime stories that, like, from the 70s or 80s or something like that, like, they have DNA, like they know they have DNA, like a hair or something like that, but they also knew, they just kind of saved, this was really smart of them back then, by the way, they would just save the sample to like test later, because they're like, oh, our technology is not good enough to test right now, but maybe in a few years, 10 years, 20 years, we can test it again. And that has actually that has solved a lot of cold cases, because they held this DNA and then tested it again years later. And so, like we couldn't detect, well, also I guess we didn't have, but like Wi-Fi didn't always exist, I guess. But like now we can use it. And so like in 10 years, what else is there? 96% of our world is dark matter and dark energy, which means we don't know what it is. Biologists say 97% of our genome is junk DNA. In math, when you get to a certain level of complexity, everything is imaginary numbers because we don't know what it is. So we just don't know all this stuff, and we just call it, oh, it's dark. Oh, it's imaginary. It's not imaginary. It's just something we can't understand yet. And so if we know all of this information is stored around us all of the time, doesn't that raise the question that the universe is so vastly complex and it has so much more information around us all the time? And then, how can we begin to access this information? What else is there? I think all the answers are there, and I think eventually in time they can become accessible. And I think all we can do right now is understand how the universe works and how we have access to all of this information, so we can begin to play the game of life better, and we can begin to win the game. Of course, life feels hard and scary when you can't access the rules or any of the information or anything that's happening in the game. It's like playing Monopoly if you can't see the pieces and you don't know how to play. The point of this book is to teach you how to play, and to be like, here's the rules, here's the pieces, here's what you do. Now we can have fun with it. It doesn't mean every single dice roll is going to go your way, but it does mean now you have the roadmap for what to do. Now we at least know what we don't know. I know, instead of everything just feeling like, oh my God, life is so overwhelming and like terrible and it totally sucks and I'm scared. Instead of it feeling so bad, At least now I know the rules, and I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. I know when I land on this piece, I pick a chance card, and I know that I don't know what's going to be on the opposite side of that chance card. You know what I mean? Like, now I can play because I know what I know and I don't know. Okay. But the book has a lot more. So also the third part of the book, which I haven't even like gotten to in terms of writing because I'm so slow at writing. So yeah, make sure to follow if you want updates on this book, and make sure to join the Experiment membership if you're really interested, because I leave a lot there and they help me all the time. The last part of the book is going to be all about manifestation. Okay, so now we have all this information. Here's how we actually use it to create our reality. See, okay, this is why you guys are helping me, because they make sense in my head, and then when I go to write them, they just, like, I just can't get the words out. I don't know. So now being forced to explain and say and talk and discuss, now you guys are helping me like be able to be like, okay, this is clearly a priority for me to write down, and I didn't write any of that down. And that's why I hate my chapter, but I'm liking it now. Now that we're going through these ideas, I'm really liking it more. So anyways, let's talk about how the radio works. In the radio, the first thing the radio does is start with the tuner. And the job of the tuner is to focus on the specific frequency. So when you turn the dial to 93.5, the tuner focuses on finding the 93.5 out there in the ethers, right? Because the airwaves are crazy. They have all the other radio waves, but they also have all the other waves of all the other things. Electromagnetic waves, Wi-Fi, you know, whatever, like that. Like they have all these competing signals, and so the tuner's job is to isolate the one frequency that you're looking for. The tuner does this job based on the concept of resonance. So resonance is when basically the radio circuits vibrate in sync by aligning with the exact frequency of the incoming wave. So when the radio circuit frequency perfectly matches the airwave frequency is amplified. See, I wrote this too scientific, like that's not how I would say that. So that's why I'm talking to you. And that's why I'm just gonna like download the transcript from this, I guess, and rewrite everything. So the tuner works based on the concept of resonance. And I'll just say it. The resonant frequency is when two two waves are basically in the same frequency and in the same phase. And so the radio circuits vibrate in sync. They are at the same frequency as the vibrations in the air. And so then they become in resonance, and it's like an automatic magnet to each other. And so then the 93.5 frequency can't help but to align with the radio. You know, a famous example of resonance is like, you know, when like the lady's singing in the opera, and then she like, but it's like a really high note, and then like all the glass shatters, you know, like that's a famous example of resonance. And that's kind of what's happening on this radio frequency is okay, I use that example because it's like the frequency of that voice just hits the glass just in that way, and then they're like aligns. That's what's happening in your radio every time that you use it. So that's what the tuner does. It like pulls out the 93.5 frequency you're looking for, but it does it by being in resonance. So, okay, so in the book, I'm not sure if I should put this here or kind of like build this up a little more and put it later, but this is how your brain creates your reality. You have a tuner in your brain essentially that becomes in resonance with the frequencies in the air. So just like how the radio, it vibrates at 93.5 to find the 93.5 frequency, it acts as if, literally it acts as if. It's like, I want 93.5, so I'm going to act as 93.5, and then by acting as, I'll just automatically be in resonance with the 93.5 hertz that's already floating in the ethers. It literally like acts as if. Law of attraction, like attracts like. Like that's how the tuner, okay, that's how I'm gonna say it instead of this scientific mumbo jumbo, because that is actually how it works. And so like With me, like if I want a certain reality, then I have to tune myself just like a radio to the frequency, resonate at that frequency, and then I receive that exact reality. Okay, so next in the radio, the next thing after the tuner. So it's in resonant frequency, it's resonating with 93.5, they're in sync, but that radio's not yet music because it's not music. Yeah, okay, so the next step is the demodulator, and this is the radio's translator. So its job is to decode the message hidden in the radio wave. So a radio wave works by like the song is like an electrical signal, but the electrical signal can't just like be in the air. It needs a carrier to push it places. And so the carrier wave, we need the radio tower because that produces the carrier waves that can go through the airwaves and carry the songs on them, literally. Carrier wave to carry the songs. I know, we couldn't think of a better name. And so anyways, the radio now receives that song, the electrical signal plus the carrier wave, and it demodulates them. It decodes it. It takes that whole package and decodes it. Okay, what's the song in here? And it pulls out the electrical signal of the song. Okay, so this is important. Okay, as I'm talking, I'm just gonna have to add these analogies in the book, I think, in this order. Okay, so your brain and heart. I have a whole program about this, my coherence program, but like, your brain and heart create your electromagnetic field. That's scientifically true. Your electromagnetic field is created through the electrical impulse of your thought and the magnetic waves of your heart. And I've always forever used this example. I don't even know where it came from, but it's like this example of like, okay, when you manifest your reality and you're communicating with the universe, the first thing you need to do is get in alignment and get your brain and heart in coherence with the universe. Because when your brain and your heart are in coherence, and I'm talking about coherence in this chapter, you can align with the frequencies like we just talked about with your desires in the universe and then receive them because you're in alignment with them. But first you have to get in alignment, because when you're communicating with the universe, like, okay, your thoughts, let's say you're thinking in your mind, like, I don't know, what kinds of things do you want? I want $1,000, I want $1,000, I want $1,000. Yeah, but if your heart is feeling nothing, like let's say you're saying affirmations, right? That's like manifestation 101. Say affirmation. But if you aren't doing it with feelings in your heart, the electromagnetic impulse, the electrical impulse in your brain is just going nowhere. It has no carrier wave, literally like this radio. It can't go anywhere. It needs the magnetism of your heart to carry it. And that's why you need to think the thought with the positive emotion. And I always use the analogy of the message in the bottle. Like to manifest, you need both, or to communicate with the person on the other side, which in this case is the universe, I guess, you need the message and the bottle. If you only send the message, that's what we just talked about. No one on the other side will receive it because it won't go anywhere. If you just have the note in your pocket, but you don't take it anywhere, no one can receive it and know what you want. The universe will not know what you want. Alternatively, if you only have the feeling, like feeling positive with no consciousness attached to it, the person will receive the bottle, but there's no message, so the universe doesn't know what to do. So that's why sometimes that's good. Like, it's a step in the right direction because at least you're feeling good, positive vibes, right? But like, the universe does not know what you want next, so it can't give it to you. You need the thought plus the feeling to carry along together. And just like a radio wave, like the transmitter tower has to have the song electrical impulse thought and then the carrier wave, like the heart's magnetism, to carry it through the literal airwaves. Cool, right? Okay. So then anyways, it gets to the radio, and the radio now has to like take out the message out of the bottle. That's basically what the demodulator does. So from there, the amplifier. So now the radio, it pulled off the song, it pulled the message out of the bottle, and now it just like adds power to it. Wait, I think a radio is manifestation. Then the amplifier adds power to the electrical song to like push it out of your speakers. You are a radio that's always on. It's like a radio you cannot turn off until you die, and then you're not a frequency anymore, or you're a different frequency, whatever. Like you have to be tuned to something. And right now in your life, you're tuned to something, and you're tuned to the life you currently have. The easy thing to do is blame everyone else and not take responsibility, but that's actually the hard thing, because every time you do that, you're denying your personal power, and then you're creating more of the same life because you aren't taking control to change it. So the more you blame this person, blame this person, blame this person, blame this circumstance, blah, 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 well, you're not taking your power back, and therefore you're just like creating more of the same. It's like if you turn the radio to country music and then you just keep saying, I hate country music, I hate this stupid radio. And it's like, easy fix, just change the station. But changing the station requires you to reclaim your power and your recognition that you are the driving force of what the radio plays. And if you just sit there and go, oh, it's the radio's fault, oh, it's the person who picked this stupid Luke Bryan song, oh, blah, 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 you blame all these people, actually you're the one in power to just tune it to a different station. Yeah, there's circumstances out there that, whatever, but like, you have the power. So the first step to changing your life and being in a new frequency is like recognizing it's your power to, like, it's your life is your responsibility, and you have all the power to change it. And sometimes that means confronting really hard truths or forgiving people that's really hard to forgive. And that's why we're here. Like, this isn't an easy game. Like, I'm not trying to make it seem like it's so easy. Like, it's not easy. We have challenges in this life. Like, it can be really difficult, but that's the point, to keep showing up and to keep forgiving and loving and being reminded that you are the light, you are the life force at any given moment, in any given time. Right now, you have the power to choose again. Right now, you have the power to choose again. Right now, you have the power to choose a different thought. Right now, you have the power to choose a different emotion. Right now, and if you didn't choose a new thought when I said it 2 seconds ago, well, right now you have the power to choose a new thought. Right now you do. Right in any moment, you have all of the power to turn the dial on the radio. Okay, so we're back to the radio. The song is out of the speakers, yay, but that's not the end of our little wave. This is how music gets to our ears. The pressure gets to our eardrum, and guess what concept comes up once again? Resonance. And so the resonance in our ear, it is vibrating at the same frequency as the sound waves, and then our brain decodes it literally like a radio. Like, how did I just explain a radio worked? It had a tuner where it tuned to a certain frequency using resonance. It had a decoder where it pulled out the song and decoded it, and then it pushed the sound through the speakers, basically. That's what your brain is doing too. It has a tuner where it's listening to the frequency that's happening out here, because remember, there's a zillion frequencies of all different hertz, cycles per second, and we can only hear a small range. I'm making sounds right now with my hands because I'm pushing those air particles all together. I just can't hear any sounds happening because it's too low of a frequency, so I can't hear it, but I know this is by definition a sound wave, but I can't hear it. So my ear has to, I know for a fact I can only perceive like a really small window of all of the sound waves that are ever being created ever of all time. And so my ear tunes like a radio to the sound. It sends that information to the brain, which decodes the frequency just like the radio, and then it pushes it out into my head. And then I hear the sound. So it's like every sound wave is going through like two of the same machine, our radio and then our brain decoder. Like, it's crazy. If you guys like this conversation, you'll really love the experiment. I opened it in February, so however many months ago, and I go in there almost every single day and leave a training. So And the trainings are between usually like 5 and 20 minutes. So like you have months and months and months of content to binge. So now is a good time to join. The way the radio takes the radio waves and transmutes them into sound waves, the brain takes the sound waves and creates our perception of music. In both instances, the device, the radio or our brain, applies a resonant frequency, which selects out of all the frequencies the one we end up perceiving. Okay, see, that was so dry. This is why I needed you guys to like say this stuff out loud. I think when I say it, it makes sense. You guys were like, that's clicking. This is good. I saw when I explain an idea, the likes are popping up. So I know you guys are liking it. I saw other times when no like pop up. So I'm like, okay, change that. And like, but who cares? I feel like that's the point. That's the feedback. We're like having a good conversation. And then when I just read what I wrote, I'm like, that's so dry. Like, this is why I'm here, because I'm like, I just need to verbally process this book, because like the way I wrote it is just, it's not how I think in my head. Like when I reread it, I'm like, this is so boring, but this isn't boring when I say it, I think, who knows? Okay, moving on to the next section. So we know the mechanism now for how sound waves are converted into music, or how radio waves are converted into music. But taking it a step beyond the mechanical, there's always some driving force that chooses the music that we perceive. It's not random. So the radio doesn't work by itself. We talked about this for a second. It needs a human. It needs a life force, anyways, that usually happens to be in the form of a human, to make a decision, to turn on the radio and then hand select a station. The whole thing we went through is physically how a radio works, the mechanism for how to transmute radio waves into the music you hear in your head, right? The whole process of what a wave does. But it's like, okay, so we know the mechanism, but who cares, kind of. The point is like, why is this happening? How can I make a new decision? None of that matters. Literally none of the mechanism we talked about matters if there isn't a life force, because without a life force, who would build the radio? Who would turn it to a station? Why would you turn it to a station? Like, why? It's like the decisions that are being made that make our reality, not the literal radio. And like, okay, let's say you turn to, Station Vampire by Olivia Rodrigo, popping through the speakers. Well, someone in some radio tower put that song on. Like, someone else made the decision to like choose that song and like input it, in the radio tower and click play. Like, someone else made that decision, and then you hear it and then you resonate with it. And so you keep the station on, but it's like, it's everything really. The mechanism doesn't matter as much as the decision making to do something. So this says more about reality to me than even the mechanism of how the wave works. It's like, okay, wait, so for all that being said, the real thing that matters is the decision making behind it and the life force behind it. Not that these are life-changing decisions. What radio station do I listen to on the way to work? But they kind of are, because everything we do, every decision we make, and therefore action we take, is changing everything around us. And so, yeah, there's a mechanism for how the radio converts, waves. But the real thing is like, why am I making those decisions? How do I make those decisions? The real power is your life force. And so when it comes to your brain, that's the decoder. Now it's all you, baby. Now you are fully in charge. And so like, now that adds a whole layer of like complexity, right? To like the life force and the decision making, but still you are in the driver's seat. Okay. And oh yeah, this is a good paragraph, I think. Well, let's talk about music. Like, think about the last time you went to the grocery store or somewhere generic like that. What songs were playing the entire time you were there? Or name one song that was playing. Like, I don't know. And it's not because your ear isn't physically hearing the frequency. It's because your consciousness isn't tuned to pay attention to that song. When I was writing these chapters, like, it's so meta, right? When I was writing these chapters today, I was in a cafe and they were playing Christmas music. And, every once in a while I get distracted, and then I'm like, you know, all I want for Christmas. You know, I'm singing along to the jams, and then I get refocused, and then I write a whole bunch in the chapter. And then suddenly, it's like, jingle bell, jingle bell rock. And I'm like, oh, new song. And I'm like, oh, my consciousness has been so distracted this whole time. I have no idea if this was the next song or if a bunch of songs played. I could estimate it based on the time length I was writing, but I don't know, because I wasn't listening. And like the volume has been the same the whole time. My ear probably was processing the same frequencies all of the time, but my consciousness wasn't tuned to pay attention to it. So you can't even use the argument of like, well, I have to hear the radio because it's on. You know what I mean? Like I have to hear it if it's on, because I can't just turn hearing off. And it's like, well, actually you can through consciousness, because if you aren't paying attention to it, you don't hear it. I only heard music intermittently when I was at the cafe, even though it was on the entire time, because of when my consciousness was paying attention to it or not paying attention to it. So your brain has a crucial role in this entire process of I mean, okay, is this concept making sense that like actually it's your life force that's dictating this whole experience, because you choose the song, or you choose to turn on the radio, you choose which station you want to listen to, you choose to pay attention to that or not. Like, you have all the power actually in dictating this scenario. You can turn the volume up or down. You have the driving force and the power. If it's the radio, yeah, there's a chance, you know what I mean? Like, who knows, like, what song is going to play next, right? So there, you know what's out of your control, but the whole experience is also within your control. Does this make sense? Maybe this is something to bring up later in the book when we talk more about consciousness and life force, and then maybe it's just not in the right spot. Like I think that might like just be too early, actually. Okay, so everything in the universe is vibration. It's not just sound waves, it's everything. The song that you're hearing in music is the result of energy vibrating at a precise frequency, creating sound waves that resonate perfectly with your ears. Frequency is the heartbeat of a wave, how many times it vibrates per second. In radio terms, if the dial is tuned to 93.5 hertz, meaning the carrier, megahertz, meaning the carrier wave is vibrating 93.5 million times every second. That's the exact rhythm needed to bring music to life in your car. But this idea of frequency isn't limited to radios or sound waves. Everything around us vibrates at its own frequency. Okay, I like that part. That part was good, I think. That didn't feel like painfully awful to read. So, I don't know. If it did feel painfully awful to read, seriously, guys, I can take bad feedback. If you guys are like, I really like you and want this to work, but it's not working, like, I can take that feedback. We know Wi-Fi exists because our computers can go, or like our phone can go on TikTok. We know microwaves, like the electromagnetic wave, exists because when we stick our food in a box, it can go from cold to steaming hot within minutes. And we know there's UV lights because our skin gets sunburnt. So that's the electromagnetic light spectrum. And there's infinity, and the visible light spectrum, so the lights we see also exist, but those are only 1% of the entire electromagnetic light spectrum. So really, there's infinity frequencies, and those are just the light ones, and we already talked about the sound ones. Sound waves are different than electromagnetic waves because they require a medium to travel through. I feel like that's a weird place in the book to put that. And I think we kind of already talked about that. So I'm just going to delete that. Well, now you guys know. Thank you for being part of draft 1. This is like the first draft. This right now is like the first time I'm telling anyone what's inside the book, really, like especially at this level where I'm reading you actual sentences, even though all the sentences suck and I'm confident none of this will make it to the final draft that you read. But thanks for being a part of it, because I feel like I need to say it out loud to like hear like when I say it out loud from reading it, then I'm like, okay, this obviously makes no sense, and then I feel like when I say it, it makes much more sense. The next part just starts to get, we start talking about the holographic universe. I feel like we jump off the rails, and I really want to fix what we talked about with the radio part before moving on. So stay tuned. I'll definitely be inside of my group, The Experiment. So if you guys have been on a long time, or you've been loving this discussion, or you want more like this, join my membership, The Experiment. It's only $11 a month, so it's really affordable, because I don't want I don't want it to be this huge investment. Like, I want you to invest if you want to be there and not have money be like this huge issue. So I wanted to make it an affordable price that like, it's just a group of us. It's like a fun membership. We all get to be together and talk about the universe and talk about the science of the universe and talk about manifestation. I always share wins, and I told them something incredible that I manifested / created / used a synchronicity like the other day, and then another synchronicity, and we're just flowing in there, and it's so fun. So if you guys have liked this discussion, definitely join The Experiment, because thank you guys for helping me. You guys are awesome. Okay, see you later. Bye.